Shmuel Aleph, 1 Samuel. There was a man from Matayim, Zaphim, in the hills of Ephraim, whose name was Elechana, the son of Yeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Toku, the son of Zuaph, from Ephrat. He had 2 wives, one named Hannah and the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. This man went up from the city every year to worship and sacrifice to Adonai Svaot in Shiloh. 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Pinchas, were Kohanim of Adonai there. One day, when Elkanah was sacrificing, he gave a portion of the sacrifice to his wife Peninnah, and portions to each of her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion, because he loved Hannah, even though Adonai had kept her from having children. Her rival taunted her and made her feel bad, because Adonai had kept her from having children. He did the same every year, and each time she went up to the house of Adonai, she taunted her so much that she would cry out and not eat. Her husband, Elkanah, said to her, "Hannah, why are you crying? Why aren't you eating? Why be so sad? Am I not better to you than 10 sons?" So Hannah got up after they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh. Eli the Kohen was sitting at his seat by the doorpost of the temple of Adonai. In deep depression, she prayed to Adonai and cried. Then she took a vow. She said, "Adonai Svaot, if you will notice how humiliated your servant is, if you will remember me and not forget your servant, but will give your child a male child, then I will give him to Adonai for as long as he lives, and no razor will ever come over his head." She prayed for a long time before Adonai, and as she did, Eli was watching her mouth. Hannah was speaking in her heart. Her lips moved, but her voice could not be heard. So Eli thought she was drunk. Eli said to her, "How long are you going to stay drunk? Stop drinking your wine." But Hannah answered, "No, my lord, I am a very unhappy woman. I have not drunk either wine or other strong liquor. Rather, I have been pouring out my soul before Adonai. Don't think of your servant as a worthless woman, because I have been speaking from the depth of my distress and anger." Then Eli replied, "Go in peace. May the God of Israel grant what you have asked of him." She replied, "May your servant find favor in your sight." So the woman went on her way, and she ate, and her face was no longer sad. They got up early in the morning and worshipped before Adonai, then returned and came to their house in Ramah. Elkanah had sexual relations with Hannah his wife, and Adonai remembered her. She conceived, and in due time she gave birth to a son, whom she named Shmuel, because I asked Adonai for him. The husband, Elkanah, went up with all his household to offer the yearly sacrifice to Adonai and fulfill his vow. But Hannah did not go up, explaining to her husband, "Not till the child has been weaned. Then I will bring him, so that he can appear before Adonai and live there forever." Her husband Elkanah answered her, "Do what seems good to you. Stay here until you have weaned him. Only may Adonai bring about what he said." So the woman stayed behind and nursed the child until she weaned him. After weaning him, he took him up with her, along with the 3 young bulls and a bushel of flour and a skin of wine, and brought him to the house of Adonai in Shiloh, even though he was just a child. After the bull had been slaughtered, the child was brought to Eli, and she said, "My lord, as surely as you live, my lord, I am the woman who stood here near you praying to Adonai. I prayed for this child, and Adonai has granted the request I have asked of him. Therefore, I too have loaned him to Adonai. As long as he lives, he is on loan to Adonai." And he prostrated himself there before Adonai. Then Hannah prayed. She said, "My heart exalts Adonai. My My dignity has been restored by Adonai. I can gloat over my enemies because of my joy at your saving me. No one is as holy as Adonai, because there is none to compare with you, no rock like our God. Stop your proud boasting. Don't let arrogance come from your mouth, for Adonai is a God of knowledge. He appraises actions. The bows of the mighty men are broken, while the feeble are armed with strength. The well-fed hire themselves for bread, while those who are hunger no more. The barren woman has borne 7, while the mother of many wastes away. Adonai kills and makes alive. He brings down to the grave and brings up. Adonai makes poor and he makes rich. He humbles and he exalts. He raised the poor from the dust, lift up the needy from the trash pile. He gives them a place with leaders and assigns them seats of honor. For the earth's pillars belong to Adonai. On them he has placed the world. He will guide the steps of his faithful, but the wicked will be silenced in darkness. For it is not by strength that a person prevails. Those who fight Adonai will be shattered. He will thunder against them in heaven. Adonai will judge the ends of the earth. He will strengthen his king and enhance the power of his anointed. Elkanah went home to Ramah while the child began ministering to Adonai under the direction of Eli the Kohen. Eli's sons were scoundrels who had no regard for Adonai. The rule these Kohanim followed in dealing with the people was that when anyone offered a sacrifice, the Kohen's servant would come while the meat was stewing with a three-pronged fork in his hand. He would stick it in a pan, kettle, cauldron, or pot, and the Kohen would take for himself whatever the fork brought up. This is how they dealt with all the people of Israel who came there to Shiloh. The Kohen's servant would actually come before the fat had burned to smoke and say to the man who was sacrificing, "Give the Kohen meat he can roast, because he doesn't want your meat stewed, but raw." If the man answered, "First let the fat burn to smoke, then take as much as you want," he would say, "No, give it to me now, or I take it by force." The sin of these young men was very serious in Adonai's view, because they treated offering made to Adonai with contempt. But Shmuel ministered in the presence of Adonai, wearing a linen ritual vest, even though he was only a child. Each year his mother would make him a little coat and bring it when she came up and her husband to offer annual sacrifice. Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife and say, "May Adonai give you children from this woman, because the boy you have loaned to Adonai." Then they would go home. So Adonai took notice of Hannah, and she conceived and bore 3 more sons and 2 daughters. Meanwhile, the boy Shmuel grew in the presence of Adonai. When Eli was very old, he heard about everything his sons was doing in Israel. They were having sex with the women during service at the door of the tent of meeting. He asked them, "Why are you doing these things? Am I hearing bad reports about you from all the people?" "No, my son, I don't hear Adonai's people spreading a single good report. If a person commits a sin against another person, the judge can mediate between them. But if a person commits a sin against Adonai, who can intercede for him?" However, they wouldn't pay attention to what their father said, because Adonai had decided to kill them. The child of Shmuel kept growing and gaining favor both with Adonai and with the people. The man of God came to Eli and told him, "Here is what Adonai says. Didn't I reveal myself to your ancestors' clans when they were in Egypt, serving as slaves in Pharaoh's household? Didn't I choose him out of all the tribes of Israel to be my Kohen? Go up to my altar, burn incense, and wear a ritual vest in my presence? Didn't I assign to your ancestors' clans all the offerings of the people of Israel made by fire? So why are you showing such disrespect for my sacrifices and offerings, which I ordered to be made at my dwelling? Why do you show more honor to your sons than to me, making yourselves fat with the choicest parts of the offering offerings of Israel my people. Therefore Adonai, the God of Israel, says, I did indeed say that your family and your father's family would walk in my presence forever. But now, Adonai says, forget it. I respect those who respect me, but those who despise me will meet with contempt. The day is coming when I will break your strength and the strength of your father's family, so that no one in your family will live to old age. At a time when Israel is prospering, you will see a rival in my dwelling, and never will anyone in your family live to old age. Still, I won't cut off every one of your men from my altar, because that would make your eyes grow dim, and you would waste away. Nevertheless, all your descendants will die young. Your sign that this will occur will be what happens to your two sons, Hophni and Pinchas. They will both die on the same day. I will raise up for myself a faithful Kohen, who will do what I want and what I intend. I will make his family faithful. He will serve in the presence of my anointed one forever. Everyone left in your family will come, prostrate themselves before him, and for a silver coin or a loaf of bread, and say, please, won't you give me some work as a Kohen, so I can have a scrap of bread to eat? The child of Shmuel continued ministering to Adonai under Eli's direction. Now in those days Adonai rarely spoke, and visions were few. Once during this period, Eli had gone to bed. His eyes had begun to grow dim, so that it was hard for him to see. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Shmuel had laid down to sleep in the sanctuary of Adonai, where the ark of God was. Adonai called, Shmuel, and he answered, Here I am. Then he ran to Eli and said, Here I am. You called me? But he said, I didn't call you. Go back and lie down. So he went to lay down. Adonai called a second time, Shmuel. Shmuel got up, went to Eli and said, Here I am. You called me? He answered, I didn't call you, my son. Lie down again. Now Shmuel didn't yet know Adonai. The word of Adonai had not yet been revealed to him. Adonai called Shmuel again a third time. He got up, went to Eli and said, Here I am. You called me? At last Eli realized it was Adonai calling the child. So Eli said to Shmuel, Go and lie down. If you are called again, say, Speak, Adonai, your servant is listening. Shmuel went and lay down in his place. Adonai came and stood, then spoke as at the other times, Shmuel, Shmuel. Then Shmuel said, Speak, your servant is listening. Adonai said to Shmuel, Look, I'm going to do something in Israel that will make both ears of everyone who hears about it tingle. On that day I will do it again. Eli, everything I have said with regard to his family from beginning to end. For I have told him that I will execute judgment against his family forever, because of his wickedness in not rebuking his sons, even though he knew that they had brought a curse on themselves. Therefore I have sworn to the family of Eli that the wickedness of Eli's family will never be atoned for by any sacrifice or offering. Shmuel lay there until morning. Then he opened the doors of the house of Adonai. But Shmuel was afraid to tell Eli the vision. Then Eli called Shmuel. Shmuel, my son. He answered, Here I am. Eli said, What did he say to you? Please, don't hide it from me. May God do whatever he said and worse, if you hide from me anything he said to you. So Shmuel told him every word and hid nothing. Eli replied, It is Adonai. Let him do what seems good to him. Shmuel kept growing. Adonai was with him, and he let none of his words fall to the ground. All Israel from Dan to Beersheba became aware that Shmuel had been confirmed as a prophet of Adonai. Adonai continued appearing in Shiloh, for Adonai revealed himself to Shmuel in Shiloh by the word of Adonai.